There exists a place where the waves still crash undisturbed in the sunset. A place where the winds still howl across the plains for those who dare to hear it. A place that is still wild, rowdy, unpredictable, and as majestic as it is dangerous. That place is none other than the long road. Freedom. Regardless of who you are or where you are, an ideal that we all strive for. An ideal that sometimes feels like it's becoming further away the more we progress as a society. Freedom. An idea that multiple generations of my family and current friends have fought to maintain. Freedom. When it comes down to that word, the truest form remains to be the real miles on the long road. Nothing more than 2 wheels and maybe a road dog or two. I am FXDLS Brooklyn, and this is my story of how I rode coast to coast and back on a Harley-Davidson. Man, how do I even start this one? Anyway, we're well into the winter here out in New York on New Year's Day, and this is about the time where I like to look back on my summer bike trips even though I continue riding throughout the winter, so here goes nothing. The trip would start out like most I've done in the last 10 years, which would be packing out my Dyna and waiting for my road dogs to show up. Most of my heavy distance trips I've been fortunate enough to do with my dad, who now well into his 60s had chosen to leave behind his Ultra Classic and do this one on a 2022 Pan America Special. Also joining us would be none other than my brother Von Gasfalt, who would be taking care of some last minute hang-ups before departing on his 2016 Lowrider S. The goal of this trip would be to go all the way, which for those of us on the East Coast means making it to the Pacific and then riding back, not shipping back. Like I said, I've been doing the heavy distance trips for about 10 years at this point, so I didn't as much feel the nervousness as much as I felt like this was a ritual at this point. Von Gasfalt pulled up to this random gas station in the Catskills, having just had his new rotor and brake setup installed. Having learned this lesson the hard way over the last 10 years, I generally always refrain from doing any major bike work right before a heavy distance trip, and this is what you might call foreshadowing. So it all begins here, about 100 plus miles north of New York City, and we are doing the first gas stop of the entire trip. How you feeling so far, Dad?
Doing good, man. Doing good.
We are ready for a coast to coast. And the man, the myth, the legend. I only got one friend that decides to install a turbo kit on his bike the day before leaving for a cross-country trip. And that's it. It's time to get some miles. We're gonna ride out the daylight. It might not seem like much, but this moment right here at this very gas station is one of the most significant moments out of the entire bike trip. So many people talk about how they want to do the big bike trips, but when push comes to shove and it comes time to pack out the bike and leave home, that's where the excuses start coming. To actually make a bold and daring plan and then have the sand to actually follow through with that plan stands to be one of the most defining moments of any bike trip. At the end of the day, you have to just start because it all begins with one single mile. Alright, 100 miles in, and it's already starting to feel like a bike trip. Why is that? Because my beautiful, nice, high-end strap is completely frayed. As you can see, it came undone, and you can't see it, but it was all the way wrapped up in yonder. Thank God it didn't get into the chain or into the primary. It's definitely starting to feel like a bike trip when things like that happen, and, you know, it is what it is. Yeah, what do you want me to tell you? It's never a dull moment out here. There would be no shortage of rain and mistakes that were made, and we would hang it up in Watkins Glen, New York. Both myself and Von Gasfalt explored this vast industrial zone, looking at our bikes that were well over 65,000 miles, and just marveling how they would once again be doing yet another bike trip. This barbecue was fantastic, and exactly what we needed after this first day on the road. All right, an excellent dinner at the Solid Barbecue spot out here in Watkins Glen. If you're ever out here, Nichols Pit Barbecue. Don't sleep on that one. Let's get out of here. Yeah, no moto camping tonight. We are all soaked. Today was mostly back roads. I think tomorrow we're going to be hopping back on the highway and doing a day of crushing some miles, standard stuff. So yeah. Good day on the road, Dad.
Good day.
Good day.
Even though it was wet, it was a good day.
Yeah. There's just something special about hanging it up on that first day and rising to meet another day of miles into the unknown. Even things as mundane as a random hotel room start to feel alive and electric when you're on the road. We reverently drank our coffee, packed our bikes, and hightailed out to explore the region of Western New York. You really do forget sometimes how beautiful your own state could be, which is why I make it a point to regularly do these bike trips. The sacred establishment known as Cracker Barrel would fill our souls with what we needed to press on to the Ohio coast. Hey, what's his name?
Harold.
Harold?
Harold.
Can you help us fix this Harley-Davidson Pan America?
I got a bigger hammer.
Part of the magic of these bike trips is, of course, exploring new places. Who knew the Ohio coast could be this beautiful? As we parked the bikes and set up camp with the sun going down, this is probably one of the most picturesque images one might conjure when dreaming up what an American coast-to-coast bike trip might look like. The bikes, the tents, the camaraderie, and of course, the road. With the gentle waves lapping and the fire crackling, we would sleep deep that night.
Time to rise and grind. Oh yeah, that's what I want to see when I wake up. That, my friends, is a beautiful sight. Show you a little bit of my world right now. Bike is absolutely crushing it, looking majestic in that morning light. Casa del Bong asphalt over here. All the essentials. You know, you gotta have a picnic table full of chaos. From everything from professional photography gear to leather jackets to coffee supplies. That's what I want to see. And of course, we got our morning fire going. Ooh, that is nice. Shout out to the road captain for the excellent fire.
Got my coffee, got my fire, watching the boats go out, the sun's coming up. It's great, good stuff, man.
Now here's the part of the trip I will make a point to tell that some choose to ignore. Remember how picturesque and wonderful everything had been? Well, that was about to change, real quick. It's not necessarily that things can go wrong on the bike trips, it's that they will inevitably go wrong on these trips, and this is an essential part of the experience that weeds out those who could handle the road and those who can't. Today would present some fantastic challenges. Remember when I said Vong Asphalt made some last minute changes on his bike? Well, here we are ripping down the highway with his front calipers dangling off the bike.
Now, if this would have got caught in the mag of his wheel, it would have been game over at these speeds. Not realizing that he no longer had brakes, he almost rear-ended my dad, but was able to pull out of it just in time to avoid it. Oh yeah, as this was happening, I would fully chew through the bushings on my bars, making it feel like my bars were about to fall off the bike. We're gonna be here for a while, so figured I'd get around for the boys before we start wrenching to get this caliper put back on. Let's see what's going on over here. We got the tools out, that's good. And this, my friends, is the point in the bike trip where things start to inevitably go wrong and break. But isn't something missing here? Ah, yes. Because as you can see, he's fully lost his front brakes. He's going to start a new trend with this one. Watch. In a year from now, everyone's going to be putting their front calipers up here on the bars. It's a much cleaner aesthetic, wouldn't you say? This is part of doing the bike trips. Every single bike trip I've ever done, there's always been 1 or 2 or 3 pieces of calamity like this. This is what you're signing up for when you're doing thousands upon thousands of miles on old Dynas that got over 60,000 miles on them. It's not if, it's when. And if you could keep that PMA, you could keep it moving, and that's what we're going to do. Taking a moment to be grateful that we were all alive after a close call, with the help of some zip ties, we would make our way to the nearest place that could help, creating a full circle-like feeling. It was 7 years ago at this point. I broke down outside this very same dealership when my oil cooler exploded on my Dyna. What a strange coincidence that once again, we would wind up on this dealership, down but not out. It was amazing to see how much of the friendly staff we knew 7 years ago was still here, and they even had my original Bad Brains tribute sticker still on the wall. Napoleon Harley-Davidson stayed true to their reputation and got us back on the road in no time. My bushings were starting to go on my bars, and luckily they had those in stock, so got the bushings done, dumped the oil, and we are set to hit the road once again. So once again, Napoleon Harley-Davidson holding it down for us 7 years later. What'd you say it was? 6,000 miles I had? So we went from, last time I was here, it was 6,000 miles. Now we're at 66,000. We're doing pretty good, right? Overcoming yet another riddle and a challenge that the road would throw at us, those miles thereafter, knowing that the bikes were solid, were simply invigorating. As a New Yorker, it's very rare that I'll encounter riding conditions that are anywhere near as close as hard as what we deal with on the daily back at home. But let me tell you, Chicago does not disappoint in that regard. Making our way through some standard Chicago traffic, we would be rewarded with yet another spectacular ride into the sunset. Now that was a beautiful, beautiful sunset ride, but now it's time for gas station dinner. Are you ready for gas station dinner? Let me show you what we got on the lineup. All right, we got the Jack Link's Teriyaki, whopping 12 grams of protein. We got Aquafina, the water, not the comedian. And we got the Kind crunchy peanut butter for more protein. And we are in Wisconsin, so that means gotta start getting the cheese. Got that beef stick combination. The tropical trail mix, just in case we're still hungry. And for good measure, we got a banana. The man in black, let's see, what is his gas station dinner? He has a Quest bar, and he has Old Trapper, old-fashioned jerky. Not bad, not bad. Oh, and a water. The road captain, well, the road captain's just got a bag of Doritos. That works too. Doritos. It's not truly a bike trip until you've done gas station dinner in a Love's parking lot. You know what I mean? Despite it all, we made it to Milwaukee. We swerved away from this Airbnb that probably would have resulted in our bikes getting stolen to a Best Western that I've stayed at many a time. We parked the bikes and collapsed after a long day of calamity on the road. Homecoming is an event that we've had some pretty damn good times at over the years, so it was definitely a destination on the list for this current trip. First on the list was to get our Dynas to Jeff from V-Twin Visionary, who was putting on one hell of a custom performance show. Next on the list was to head on over to the Harley-Davidson headquarters to borrow some bikes for the day. See, this is real biker stuff, taking your Uber over to the Harley-Davidson headquarters. It doesn't get more biker than this, y'all.
Vong Asphalt is ripping the Sportster S for today. Oh, it's got Vong Asphalt colors, dude. They knew you were coming. They knew it. And then here's my whip for today. Of course, the Pan America Special, just like Dad. Very excited to rip on this thing. Ho, 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 yeah. What is this, Noodle Fest? What is going on? And here we go. Throttles over bottles 2024. Quite a few bikes here. Here we go. We got Chelsea's Street Bob over here. Classic. Well done. Absolutely sick. Anyone who bought an El Diablo has made a good decision, you know. Really good to meet this dude. This is Kayla. This is probably one of my favorite paint jobs he's ever done. I like when people mix things up, like do some like zebra stripes, stuff like that. So yeah, as you can see, quite a turnout out here. These came out great. Very excited for these.
Andy! Want the leather pro?
Yeah, those things will last forever.
Doing like introductions if you wanna.
You want me to jump in there?
Yo, you ready for this?
Yeah.
Let's get it.
I had been collaborating with Chelsea from Ride X Sober, who was leading the annual Throttles Over Bottles ride, and as always, it is important to support things that are bigger than yourself. I've always hated the excessive amounts of booze being pushed within the mainstream biker culture, so Ride X Sober was a cause that I've always stood behind, even before finding my own path to sobriety. It was great getting to catch up with Chelsea, and of course, getting the first glance at our collaboration t-shirt. It was also great getting to meet Kayla for the first time, whose custom road glide has definitely made an impression throughout this last year. But maybe the biggest highlight was getting to meet Ethan with his El Diablo ST. Apparently this kid has been watching my content since he was in middle school, and it was a true honor to see that I had an early impact, however small, on a rider that held himself with such respect on a fantastic build. It was a good reminder of why I try to hold myself with respect and PMA within my content, because the youth is always watching. After the rides, we got to induct Ethan into the Barrel Boys, which is for anyone who crushes miles and Cracker Barrel pancakes. As you could see, Homecoming was an absolute blast. From getting to support an event and a cause that I'm really passionate about, to getting to meet riders that I've influenced over the years, to also getting to take in and enjoy one of the best events that truly highlights the Harley-Davidson community. Homecoming was an absolute blast. But maybe the icing on the cake was somehow being allowed to go backstage to watch a band that was regularly on rotation for me as a kid. None other than The Offspring. Who would have thought that stacking miles on some ratchet New York City Dyna could have gotten us that far? Ripping through the Milwaukee streets after the show, the city was simply electric, which was standard for the Homecoming rally. But then, something totally unexpected would happen that none of us would see coming. Harley-Davidson would approach myself and Vong Asphalt with a most intriguing proposition, asking us if we would like to continue our trip on one of the newest offerings from the Bagger lineup. I had spent so much of my riding career writing off the Bagger line completely, and when the opportunity came to truly put it to the test, we knew what we had to do. It was the morning after the last day of Homecoming, and the city was sleepy and still. We ripped our Dynas back to the headquarters to something that we thought we would never do. These two 2016 Dyna Lowrider S's simply brought us through hell and back throughout the last decade. But when destiny comes knocking, you either heed the call or you fail to seize a good opportunity. We chose the former.
I never would have thought I'd be saying goodbye to my Dyna for a bagger, and it really was hard to walk away in this moment. But I also knew if I was truly going to state the opinion of writing off an entire model of bike, I needed to give it a fair shake. And hence, we found ourselves throwing a leg over a 2024 Road Glide and Street Glide. This was a big moment for us, and funny enough, randomly within this moment, our friend Olivier would roll up on his Road King. He happened to also be heading further west, so just like that, a crew of 3 became 4. We said goodbye to Matt from Full Tank Adventures, who we had had a blast catching up with, and hit the road. Within miles of being on these baggers, we looked at each other, both validating that out the gate, these bikes had some serious potential. Going from the stripped down Dyna platform to the opposite end of the spectrum, you should have seen how long it took us to figure out how to pack these new bikes out, but we eventually figured it out. We loaded the bikes up, savored the moment, and prepared to say goodbye to Milwaukee to head further into the west. Like us, Olivier was a seasoned distance rider, so within the pace of relentlessly stacking miles, he was right at home. One of the things that modern day mathematics and science has still not been able to fully understand is how large groups of birds are able to fly in such coordination with one another. But I feel like when you have the right road dogs and the right riding chemistry, you could really feel and understand this phenomena firsthand about how many moving separate parts become one entity. We finished the day in Sparta at a hotel I've stayed at a bunch of times within my cross-country trips. The bikes were loaded up by 7 the next morning, and we wasted no time. We would play the rain game here and there, most notable Olivier's rain gear that made him look like a giant Pac-Man. And within no time we pushed these bikes to 1,000 miles, which means that we had to get them serviced as they were brand new bikes. Shout out to a fellow Dyna bro in service that got us in and out here, that was a game changer. We then passed into one of my favorite states to ride in, which was none other than South Dakota. At yet another random KOA, we set up camp, having no idea what was in store for us the following day. We would wake up to a morning of hail the size of golf balls, but as we loaded the bikes, the sun had come out, another campfire was doused, and more miles ahead. There's a certain vastness and expanse that only the West can offer. Maybe it's because I live in the confines of New York City that has me continuing to come back year after year. The miles were picturesque as you could see, but would quickly turn to challenging as temperatures would soar past 100 degrees. This is what you might call hard miles. The miles, of course, that would sharpen all of us into true road warriors throughout the last decade. At the end of hard miles usually comes some sort of reward, and today, it would be a South Dakota landscape that was second to none. Throughout the last 10 years, I've made it a point to stop here, and with good reason. The sun would set on another classic day on the road, Olivier capturing the energy of the day in one simple frame that Harley-Davidson would go on to post onto their main Instagram account. Because these are the moments you have to take in. The moments you have to relish. The moments that will come one time and one time only. So, you better enjoy them. As the sun went down, we would make our way back to camp. We pulled in with the last of the light remaining to see my dad sitting in peace, just enjoying the evening. All my life, I've watched my dad grind to the bone, so moments like this, where I could see him just relaxed and happy, does more for me than any monumental sight on the road. We would slam some burgers at some random bar and call it a night from here. The day would start out like any as we departed from the Badlands. The road captain and Olivier wanted to ride 50 miles down some unpaved road. Usually myself and Von Gasfalt would enjoy this, but not on brand new bikes that belong to the company of Harley-Davidson. We split up at this point, the destination being Rapid City. It's truly the moments like this that actually come to summarize the trip. It doesn't always have to be Needles Highway or the PCH or something truly epic. Sometimes it just has to be some random road in the middle of nowhere surrounded by nothing but companionship and western expanse. We made it to Rapid City, which for me feels like the unofficial marker that you're entering the Sturgis motorcycle rally. The first stop would be Black Hills Harley-Davidson. There is a lot to see and do at the Black Hills Harley-Davidson, as you can see. I always make it a point to pick up a custom pair of earplugs. These guys are definitely not certified doctors, but nothing has gone catastrophically wrong from using them over the years, well, yet at least. We would wrap up the day in Spearfish, eat dinner, and close out yet another classic day on the road. We were fortunate to not only get to hang out and ride with Jace, the painter who is responsible for the flame job on my Dyna, but we were also invited to be on his podcast, which was yet another accolade within this bike life that we would hold on to. Next on the list would be Spearfish Canyon, of course. So this was the first place I had stopped at the first time I rode to Sturgis, almost 10 years back at this point. There's something very profound about this place. I'm not very spiritual, but you could almost feel like there's something more when you cross through this canyon, especially on a motorcycle. The next day, the road captain wanted to ride well into Wyoming to stop at one of his favorite pancake spots, which sounded like a good plan for us. Of course, we had to stop by and check out Main Street Sturgis. For rallies like this, I'm generally more into enjoying the riding and not so much the standing around, but you do have to make it a point to stop by Main Street Sturgis at least once, just to experience the sheer volume of motorcycles constantly passing through. You don't have to stay long to see why Sturgis remains the king of all motorcycle rallies, and has had us coming back year after year. So far, we have been doing pretty well cutting our teeth on these new baggers, but the truest test will be none other than the Saddleman Hill climb. We handled it with no problem, and got to catch up with our good friend Pat from back home. For some, Sturgis is the destination, but for us, it was just a small stop along the way to something greater. We said our goodbyes, looked back on the good times together, packed out the bikes, and pursued on. So if you ever want to feel small, cross the state of Wyoming on a motorcycle. Laying down hundreds of miles, we would go without seeing another soul, which again, coming from a place where I'm from, is truly a beautiful thing. But then, we would hit Utah. Utah would come on with the beauty you would expect, but would then quickly turn into rain. It was nothing new at this point. We threw on our rain gear and kept it moving. It's funny that given all the epic landscapes that we had crossed throughout the day, that the most memorable moment would be sitting across the table from my dad in this random hole-in-the-wall restaurant, sitting down and eating some enchiladas. Another morning, another pack job, more gas. I would marvel at the unique beauty of the state of Utah, but nothing would prepare me for what was about to come next. It was always a bucket list item to hit the flats one day on a motorcycle, but again, to do it side by side with my dad, well, nothing can ever come close to how powerful that moment was. The fact that I had had the fortune to be able to do one cross-country trip with my dad was already a gift of a lifetime, but to consistently be able to do it throughout the last 10 years is something else entirely. I'm not sure it could ever get better than this moment right here, and it's one I'm going to hold on to forever. So I've had a lot of cool moments within this bike life, from custom performance builds to big trips, but I would trade everything in a heartbeat for times like this with my dad. Crossing through Nevada in the middle of the summer would be the absolute hell you'd expect, well over 100 degrees with unrelenting sun. Hydration and perforated riding gear was a must. But if you don't have the will to push on when the miles get hellish, you simply won't last long on the road. It was moments like this that stood as a reminder of why most people choose not to do intense bike trips like this. But once again, the road often rewards those who press on despite the odds, and today's reward would be none other than reaching the first In-N-Out we would cross as we were approaching the California border. Thousands of miles into this trip, far from home, our prime destination was within our grasp. For a biker born and raised in New York, crossing the California border on your bike is always going to be a big moment. Me and my dad parted ways briefly after dinner, so I took in this moment by myself with a field full of cattle wandering around and wondering who is disturbing their evening graze. As always, it wouldn't be a bike trip without things going wrong. This shoulder was softer than I anticipated, and the bike sunk in like quicksand. Due to the crash bar, both myself and the bike were fine, and what could have been a really painful moment turned into a highlight with these three coming to help me out so I didn't have to fully unload the bike just to pick it up. Just another good reminder that it doesn't matter what you ride, as the biker community stood strong and supportive on this day. I rode into the night, marveling at how vastly different the landscape could become within the span of a day of miles.
Another good night's sleep on the road. I'll show you guys a little bit of what my life looks like right now. Yeah. Some essentials in the tent, as always. Didn't need this last night. It was dropped down to the 50s. I was actually really cold, even with my 45-degree sleeping bag. We had Theodore Roosevelt with us to remind us what it means to be a man. And of course, not far from me is my 2024 Street Glide. Man, oh man, have I been enjoying this bike so much on this trip. We are over 2,000 miles with this bike since we picked it up in Milwaukee a little bit over a week ago. We've been crushing miles, man, and this bike has been amazing. And like I said, I sleep very well next to this bike, so it's not a far walk, but if you actually just take a little hike down this way, you got this beautiful little babbling brook right here, you know, and this was just such a nice thing to sleep next to. It's like a natural noise machine, man. I slept great last night, so yeah, like I said, this is just a fantastic place to camp, you know. Like I said, Tahoe, California, it's literally look around in any direction, and there's just natural beauty, so enjoying my life right now. We got the road captain here, ahead of the game. Look at him, he's fully packed. These Pan America guys, you just can't keep up with them, you know what I mean? It's been good, right, Dad? All right, another campground, another load up completed. The road captain mounts his Pan America special, and we are heading on out.
There you go.
Love you, Dad.
Love you too. Love you, buddy.
And yeah, like a ritual, every time I do it, a little bit easier, a little bit smoother, a little bit more efficient, going nowhere. 2 straps, that's all you need. 2 solid straps. Let me see, how many miles have I put on this bike so far? 2,500 miles. We do have some family members on the West Coast that we made a point to visit, some of which had served in World War II. A good reminder of those who fought and sacrificed for us to be having this experience right now. This was, of course, a coast-to-coast trip, and we still had a good amount of riding to do before we would hit the Pacific. Onward we rode. If crossing the border was a big moment, then making it to the Pacific was monumental. The herons glided across the sky, and the salty mist seemed to blanket everything. Growing up, the ocean was never far, so in a way, it felt like I was coming home. As I took the first plunge into the cold Pacific, I reflected on this coin that I carry with me on the daily. An important reminder that one day, it's gonna be the big kiss goodnight, so you better start living while you have the chance. Both my wife and my mom actually flew out to meet us here as we continued our descent down the legendary PCH. So she's used to my rowdy Dyna, so this Street Glide was a massive upgrade in regards to comfort. The thing you learn pretty fast as you ride down the PCH is literally anywhere you stop is the most picturesque beauty, and honestly, it'd probably take a lifetime to fully appreciate this stretch of highway. We rode down, taking in this level of majestic beauty that only the Pacific Coast could possibly offer, far from home, thousands of miles into an epic bike trip, surrounded by my loved ones. It truly does not get better than this. We continued down the PCH, reconnecting with distant family and eating some legendary tacos, and we would wrap up the day in Cambria, rewarded by possibly the most majestic sunset in the entire trip. Tomorrow, we would start making our journey back east, but perhaps the most epic landscapes of the journey were still yet to come.
We very much enjoyed our time in California, as you could see, but it was time to head back east. We said goodbye to our loved ones, packed out the bikes, and proceeded to ride through 105-degree heat straight into Bakersfield to meet up with none other than the Bulletproof Welder. Getting to ride and hang out with Trev from Bakersfield was definitely a highlight of the trip, and getting to see his vision in regards to what custom performance could be in person definitely sparked some inspiration for me within an upcoming build. We parted ways, got a couple of hours of sleep, and prepared for yet another day of hellish western heat. Laying down our first miles well before the sun had risen, we wasted no time. We stopped for gas at this random insane candy land of an attraction. Riding down the strip in Vegas was surreal, making us almost forget that it was over 105 degrees outside. This would be one of the last in-and-outs we would find, so we had to stop. Have you ever been so hot that you couldn't even eat? I stared at this legendary burger, but honestly, I couldn't even bring myself to take a bite. We would press on through the inferno. Stopping at various gas stations, I would take the opportunity to stuff every pocket in my riding jacket with ice, only to have it fully melted and dry within 15 minutes. This was heat on another level. The heat would eventually dissipate as we crossed into Utah, and I never thought I would be so happy to ride into the rain after a day like this. As always, there were rewards for laying down the hard miles. I've definitely seen some rainbows in my life, but nothing like the ones that we would see this day in Utah. As we set up camp, we had to just sit and marvel at this true American landscape. Before turning in for the night, we decided we wanted to explore the area, and my dad, adventurous as always, would have us laying down countless unpaved miles into the unknown. This was yet another big moment right here, where we just had to park the bikes and take it all in. I've been creating motorcycle content for going on 10 years now, and as I've grown, so has the opportunities. But still, at the end of the day, the most important thing has remained the same, which is moments like this. Just me and my dad continuing to explore this country in the most American way possible, 1 mile at a time. Moments purchased with hard miles, discipline, and PMA. Speaking of hard miles, perhaps this was the hardest day of the trip. What would start as a drizzle would quickly turn torrential. It got so bad that the road we were on had gotten fully washed away, and the Department of Transportation had closed the full length of the road entirely. This was our only road to get to our destination, which was Moab, of course, a place that my dad had always wanted to visit. We could have gave up at this point, but we decided to circumvent the flood by riding 200 plus miles out of our way. Once again, the hardest miles produce perhaps the most majestical moments at the end, if you could fight on and keep that PMA. After an insane day, we had successfully made it to Moab, finding perhaps the weirdest gas station I've ever been to in my life. We would sleep good this night. Moab, true to its reputation, is unimaginably grand and vast. The type of place to remind you how small you truly are. One grain of sand within this churning and constantly moving planet. To see my dad finally get to check off a lifelong bucket list item was the continuation of checking off key moments that I would hold onto for the rest of my life. One of my goals throughout this trip was to step up my moto camping game and start cooking, and thanks to some key advice from Stacy, this goal was achieved with no issues. Yeah, I know, it was slightly burnt, but no one's expecting a 5-star meal out here, you know what I mean? We would spend the rest of our day exploring Arches National Park and would enjoy yet another spectacular western sunset. I would savor this last cup of coffee in the West, as we would now be blasting some heavy miles back east. As always, riding through Colorado does not disappoint. Starting our next day in Nebraska, we would crush a well over 800-mile day, bringing this street glide back home to Milwaukee. So I'll have plenty of separate videos specifically about this bike, but let's just say, over 5,000 miles later, this street glide had completely exceeded my expectations. In short, these miles with this bike completely changed my mind on the modern bagger platform, and I would be lying if I didn't say it was hard to part with this one after all the time and miles we'd spend together. Harley-Davidson had taken good care of my warhorse while I was gone, and coming back to this bike always felt like coming home. Coming off of the 5,000 plus miles on the modern street glide back onto my 2016 Dyna is definitely an insane feeling and makes you appreciate how far Harley has come in regards to innovation throughout the last 8 years. It was great swapping stories from Matt from Full Tank Adventures. We said goodbye to the street glide, threw the kickstands up, and started our final leg of the trip. We would make one last stop over at the house of Harley-Davidson, who would hook us up with a quick service to confidently close out this last leg of the trip. Ripping down 90 and heading east was a familiar routine that we had established over the years, and however normal and routine it has become, it's never gotten any less fun. We'd find ourselves closing out our day outside of Cleveland, and even in some random parking lot in Ohio. Things just hit different on the long road. The final hotel room. We got the coffee flowing. It's 5:30 in the morning. Kickstands up, 6 a.m., baby. Got the road captain wrapping it up. Yeah, what a long, strange trip it's been. That last cup of coffee of the trip is always going to be bittersweet. In one sense, you're excited to get back home after 3+ weeks on the road, and in another sense, the road has kind of become life. The beautiful routine of drinking that first cup of coffee, loading the bike, and crushing miles into the unknown. We would take a new route home through Pennsylvania that would cut through all these mountains, which was a nice way to mix it up. This was the final rest stop. Me and my dad once again crushing another big bike trip together. Crossing into New York, we're reminded of why we make it a point to get out of this place whenever we can. I did not miss the relentlessly senseless driving culture out here. The Jones Beach pencil is the general marker that you've made it to the Atlantic Ocean. Riding all the way to the Pacific and all the way back to the Atlantic, 7,000 plus miles later, is possibly the truest feeling of completion I've ever felt in my life, and my only wish is that everyone could experience this at least once. The pencil stood tall just where I had left it, and those waves crashing on my home coast will forever sound different after a trip like this. I absolutely relished the final wins of this bike trip, there and back again. Another epic bike trip added to the list with none other than my dad. So I hope you enjoyed watching this one half as much as we enjoyed doing it. Forever the bike trips, forever the road, and forever PMA. FXDLS Brooklyn is out.